Hey, how y'all doing? This is the Count the Cost podcast. We are back with who I will say is has been a mentor. He don't know that he's been a mentor to me, but someone I've been watching and appreciating in this city of Grand Rapids has really helped me look at business and things a different way. I'll have him introduce himself soon. But on the Count the Cost podcast, we try to bring people on to just be real open and as transparent as they want to be about not just their story, but just different topics. So we'll flow through that. But I want to introduce the man of the hour. Want to introduce yourself, sir?
Attah Obande. That's me, man.
So Attah has been, for me, a real force in this city, especially regarding entrepreneurship. Whenever I see him talk about entrepreneurship, he has me think critically about how are we supporting Black businesses in this community just as much as we would support other businesses, including other small businesses as well. So Attah, coming to the podcast, man.
Man, I'm glad to be here, man. I'm glad to share this. The chair.
Yeah, this is the
chairs.
chair
With you, the room with you. I do got a bone to pick with you real quick, though.
Oh, shoot. Uh-oh.
So, once upon a time, somebody that worked with me once gave me the title of the best boss they've had. Yeah, it meant a lot to me, man. But then I ran into that person again, and they told me that you have officially taken that title from me. So it's a bone to pick with you, but it's also some kudos to you, man, for the work that you're doing and the team that you're building. So
Yes, sir.
I'll take that dagger out of my heart, and I'll be like, I'll take that as a compliment. So
Thank you. One of the things I can say is just watching how transparent, real, and relational you are has been beyond helpful for me, because that same person was not afraid to say, this is how I prefer a boss to be. So it's been dope to be able to live up to that.
I love it.
So I'm not going to lie, coming out to the podcast, we got to be real. So as we were setting up, my man Attah, it's been a busy day. And man, just to show how busy it was, Attah, what happened, man?
So I sat down and I'm just decompressing, and I decided to cross my leg and get comfortable. And I look at my shoes that I'm wearing, and I'm like, those aren't the shoes I put on. But then I realized that I did put the shoes on that I thought I put on, and so I'm here with two different shoes, man. So it ain't trying to be stylish. It's just your brother grabbed two different shoes.
So it get like that sometimes, man. Have you ever been in a space where you done put on the wrong shirt, different shoes, but the great thing is you made it here.
I made it here, man. I feel the shoes.
So let's jump into your story. Like, what are some things you want to share about who you are?
Who is Attah? Well, I'm a husband. I'm a father, and I like to think of myself as a brother and a friend. I think. I love to serve. I love to help people. I think it's something that I got from my mom, and I believe that everybody deserves the opportunity to do and be what they have the potential to be. And one of the things it's interesting because when I went through I like to call pre-midlife crisis, one of the things I realized about myself is I love to move people from point A to point B. And one of the things that I learned that really, really frustrates me is when I see wasted potential in people. And so because of that, I feel like that's what drives me and pushes me in my relationships, whether that is in the work that I do or the relationships that I have. And so, yeah, I'll say that's Attah.
So you hit on a couple things that we're going to touch upon. Wasted potential. So through your work, your experience, why do you think people either waste their potential, or what contributes to them wasting their potential?
I think that's a loaded question. We could spend an hour on just that question, man. So why do I think? Ask me the question again, because there's two parts to it.
Yep. Why do you think people waste their potential?
Yep. So why do you think people waste their potential? I think number one, I think it begins with identity. And I think that when people don't see themselves in a certain way, then there can't be that, right? It's interesting because when Spring GR started in the first place, one of the things that was said in one of the early meetings that really, really kind of grabbed onto me that said, okay, this is something I want to try to push out, was the idea of seeing and believing. right? And so when people see something, it gives them the opportunity to believe that they can aspire to it, right? And so the idea behind Spring GR was, if we can unearth other successful minority-owned businesses, then lets other people that are around see it and say, man, I know Dondrea, man. I've seen him, we grew up from around the way. If he can do it, man, I can probably do it. So, but identity, it begins with identity. Like if you can identify or you can't see yourself in it, then you're not going to do it. So I think when there's wasted potential, people don't believe whatever that thing is for themselves. And for me, I was always quiet, kind of like very introverted, sit in the corner guy. I was a little guy, and so I always...
Was this in high school or when
school,
was it?
Yeah,
Okay.
Man. I was a tiny dude, man. I was like less than 5 feet until like I was a junior, and I probably weighed 90 pounds soaking wet with 3 sets of clothes on. Like I was little guy.
Not
like literally, like girls in my class would pinch my cheek and be like, "You're so cute." I'm like, "Yo, we are the same age, man. Don't be pinching my cheek.
Get off my cheeks."
Yeah, but I've always been kind of like the little guy and didn't think that my voice mattered. And so one of the things that has helped me in my journey is people that saw potential in me and drew it out.
Right.
And so that's one of the things like it has always pushed me to try to say, okay, how can I draw that out of people? And so it begins with that identity.
Love it. So what are some things that contribute to, some of the barriers that, impact their identity?
I think that's the other side of the coin, right? If I go back to the analogy of seeing and believing, I think it comes down to upbringing. What we have around us, what we see around us, what we've been told, the voices the things that we've been told that we start to believe and internalize, and then the stories we start to tell ourselves about ourselves. Yeah. Man, I'm like, nobody in my family's ever done it, so I don't know that I'll ever be able to do it. The random teacher that tells you you'll never amount to nothing, or the girl that you're trying to date that told you you're so cute and so you can't date nobody in your class. So stuff like that, right? That really starts to take root. And then we start to tell ourselves that story over and over and over again. You tell yourself a story over and over again, eventually you start to believe it.
That's
good
real.
or bad.
Yeah. So you mentioned Spring GR. I'll have you talk about what Spring GR does soon. But let's talk about your current work. You said one of the things you do is love to help people get from point A to point B. Yep. Tell us how that's reflected in your work now.
So right now I work at an immigration law firm, Elizabeth Rosario Law. And one of the things that we do, so our mission as a firm is to change lives and create opportunities. So one of the things we know about the immigrant population, mostly the undocumented population, is a lot of them kind of stay in the shadows because you're coming here to try to build a life for your family, but you don't have the legal rights, if you will, to do that. And so we create opportunities. A lot of our clients have been victims of some crime or trafficking or whatever the case may be. And so, so we aim to help them. And so in order to help them, we need a solid team that's going to be able to do that. And so one of the things like I try to do with my teams is pay attention to who they are and what they're doing. Try to see how we can put them in the right positions to help them grow. But then also being able to kind of help develop them as teammates and as leaders and whatever the case may be. So that's what it looks like from day to day for me right now.
I love it. So you talk about team and development. What are some of the tips for developing your team?
Tips for developing your team. One of the things I think as leaders, and it's interesting. So I was going to actually write about this. So I'm going to put it out here.
Exclusive, y'all. Exclusive.
One of the things that we don't talk enough about as leaders is listening. And I've mentioned this a little bit in your all day training with your team. But listening is so important because listening and paying attention. So I think is extremely important, and because it gives you insight into where a person is, it gives you insight into where the areas for growth can be, and it gives the individual the opportunity, I think, to express themselves. And so being able to use the listening to be able to then help move people forward by identifying, okay, these are where the gaps are, and then how do I help kind of feel?
Listening is tough, Attah. It's tough.
It is. They say we listen at like a 30% efficiency rate.
Yeah.
Last I checked, that's failing. I mean, you work in school.
Now,
right?
is this for adults or I was about to say, is this for adults or
this
kids?
is general. This is like average, like 20. So I used to do this training, and it deals with coaching, right? With life coaching, and a big skill in coaching is listening. And one of the things once we share, hey, people listen at like a 29% or 30% efficiency rate. There's an exercise that we tell people to do. When you leave and you see a group of people talking, enter into the group and don't say a word. Just observe, right? And observe how many times somebody gets interrupted, how many times somebody shares something and someone completely misunderstands it because they didn't even let them finish whatever they're saying before they started talking. And when you do that, I've done that, quite a few times. And so it's profound when you see that because the other thing that it does, it's really annoying because you start to realize that sometimes you're in a conversation that lasts 20 minutes that could have lasted 3 if people would just listen to the full comment before they respond. So,
Facts.
yeah. Anyway.
So I'm a part of the Kellogg Leadership Network, and we did an exercise.
Sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I would say they have really helped me look inward as much as possible. They've also helped me understand that the biggest barrier that I have, which I think most of us have, is we make excuses about things that we can't control.
Okay,
right?
Give me an example.
So, for example, let's say we're having a listening exercise and you're probably talking about something and it may have hit me a certain way or someone else comes in and starts to talk. I'm like, oh, I couldn't listen to you because X, Y, and Z, right? Instead of saying like, okay, why am I truly not listening, right? Could I have interrupted the space and say, hey, excuse me, I'm trying to listen to that person. Even when we talk about team and leadership, well, I didn't make that decision because of them. So the first couple months, it was irritating, but I think it helped me hone in something that we'll talk about soon too, is accountability. It's like, Dondrea, like you control your decisions.
100%.
So like it's on you.
Yeah.
And I feel now empowered to take ownership in what that looks like, but also say like, I'm listening to Attah because I'm choosing to listen to Attah. Yeah. Like I'm not going to make excuses about that. So we've done a listening exercises, and for example, it's like 4 of us in a room, and one person is speaking, and while that one person's speaking, our coach is like, okay, you listen for like feelings, you listen for facts, and you listen for something else. And once we all start talking about the things that we heard, I'm like, dang, that's crazy. Like in everyone's story or what they're saying, there's facts, there's feelings, there's different things that come out. What are we trying to listen for? Yeah. So I say that to say, like, I have learned that listening is a skill. We have to learn to embrace it, but it starts by not saying nothing when someone's talking. Yeah. I'm like, dang, that's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's you said a lot of things, listening for facts, listening for feelings. That's one of the things also as part of coaching that you're supposed to do. Partly because when you have facts and you have feelings, there's something in between that. And the in between that is the story you tell yourself about the fact that you just experienced. And then that story you tell yourself derives a feeling. So if I'm chilling here, Attah, I need you to come here for this podcast. We're going to start at 6:30. And I show up and then we start at like 7 o'clock. I'm like, bro, why this dude starting at 30 minutes late? Now I'm telling myself a story, right? This dude don't respect my time. He's XYZ. So now I'm pissed off because I'm like, Dondrea don't respect my time.
I apologize for starting at 10 when I said 6:30.
It is.
No,
So it's only 6:35 right now, people. But what needs to happen then is I need to have a conversation with you and say, hey, what happened? Like, where are we at? And you're like, yo, Attah, like, we were trying to reboot things and the computer wasn't working, and I had to shoot out to go get a battery because it wouldn't work. And, you know, so now I'm getting more facts, right, to correct the story in my head. And so a lot of times when you hear facts and emotion, the big question becomes, what's the story that you're telling yourself? I think it was, I want to say it's Simon Sinek that I learned that from, is the importance of the story that we tell ourselves, because it really informs the emotion that we have. And actually it wasn't Simon, I think it was Simon Sinek, the emotion that we have, and then the action that then follows.
Whew. Okay, so you starting to drop more nuggets. All this going into your book? Because we can't share it all, Ty, if it's all going into your book.
We'll see.
So you also talk about like that point where you start to get the facts and ask questions. From my experience, I think it's really tough to have difficult conversations. Why is that?
So Joseph Grenny, he wrote a book, and he did a study. And he said that in the study, there's something in our upbringing that somewhere along the lines we learn that it's more important to keep a friend than to tell the truth. Meaning that we worry that if I tell you the truth about yourself, then I'm going to lose the relationship. And so he did this study, him and his son did this study to see how early does that happen. And his son did this funny experiment with his classmates, young kids. So I've got an 8-year-old kid, and kids that age typically they're straight shooters. Shooters. They'll call it like it is. Anyway, he made brownies. He made 2 different sets of brownies. One brownie he made just regular way, and then the other brownie he made and substituted salt for the sugar. So as you can imagine, it would taste not the best. And then
trying to kill him.
And then he went to the school and he put it on a table and he had all of his friends try it out. He gave them $1 to try it out and give him an honest reaction. And then he told them that the brownies that had the salt in it was his grandmother's recipe. His dead grandmother's recipe. And so they are eating these brownies, and almost every kid, when they put the brownie in their mouth, their face tells you exactly what they think it tastes like. Yeah. But then they would always say that the salted brownies tasted better. And somewhere along the lines we think that, but we don't realize that being able to be honest with people about who they are and what they've done is really what actually builds relationships. It's just a matter of how you have those conversations. And I think that becomes very critical, I should say, in a position of leadership.
Yeah, I'm starting to value, honesty and transparency in a different way, because I agree. There are many times where I'm like, if I say this to them, they're going to feel some type of way. Because I felt like if people tell me the truth, I'm going to feel some type of way. So it's very interesting that we start, experiencing that at an earlier age. But I don't know if there's direct support and mentorship behind addressing that, if that makes sense. Because I watch my son play with his friends, and instead of them being honest, they kind of hurtful, or maybe it's honest. I don't know. But one thing that I recognize now is like, I am not always an intervention in between that, and pulling them and helping them learn those things. Because growing up, like, we talked about each other all the time. Yeah. But like when we was little, it was just a thing. We just talked about each other. Oh, look at your shoes. Look at blah, blah, blah. So that's so
look at your shoes, Attah. You got 2 different shoes on.
Look at his shoes, y'all. He don't know what he doing. But yeah, it's very interesting to see like early intervention, because there's this push to do everything early now. But when we talk about building healthy relationships, building communication, I feel like that's a lost priority. Again, that's my opinion. And now, like, my goal is to make sure in the household, like, first and foremost, accountability. Like, how do we address that in the household? But let's shift a little bit and talk about, I think, where we first started to connect, which was Spring GR. Can you tell everybody what Spring GR is?
So yeah, Spring GR is a local business training program that takes entrepreneurs or individuals with business ideas and walks alongside them to offer coaching and support to help them bring those ideas to life. The idea behind it is that Spring Jar believes that everybody deserves the opportunity for their idea to be tested and thriving in the marketplace.
So yeah, when I first met Attah, I had the business at 1428, which I still have. I don't promote as much, but I think that was like a starting point for me, which allowed many different things to blossom in my life. But I think going through Spring GR gave me confidence in knowing like it's okay to fail.
Absolutely.
I failed so much, but at the same time, like I developed blueprints. I got comfortable with it. So Spring GR was very helpful. But in the topic of like small businesses and Spring GR, specifically in Grand Rapids, what has been the story of small businesses?
Small business, which kind of small businesses? So, I qualify that just because Grand Rapids, as many of you or many people have heard, has been touted as a great place to start a business.
Yeah.
We've been on Forbes lists. We've been on all kinds of lists about great places to start a business. And Grand Rapids, I also think, has this culture of, has in those years, in the last 10, 15 years maybe, has become a place where it's almost like sexy to start up a business.
Yeah.
But one of the areas that we really, really struggle with as far as business growth in Grand Rapids is that middle ground from getting from startup to scale. Right. So there's a lot of great resources in Grand Rapids, a lot of good entrepreneur support organizations that are doing great work to help with startups. But there's a gap in terms of helping businesses grow. And that's one of the things like I think I saw through our work at Spring GR was we were really trying to bring people in. And your story is similar to a lot of businesses where the business they came to Spring GR for, they're not all running now. Facts. They've pivoted to something else that has grown far beyond what they thought it was going to be. Yeah. And I think the idea behind it is that that Spring GR, I'm still saying we're like I'm still there. Love Spring GR still, by the way. But the idea behind it is that Spring GR is teaching a business thought process, helping give the blueprint for this is how you want to think of the process of growing your business. But beyond that, once the business has been kind of tested and there is a need for it in the marketplace, there are things that need to happen to move a business to that next level. Yeah. And I think that's one of the areas that like I really would love to see Grand Rapids kind of grow and address. Yeah. Correct.
I love it. So why do small businesses fail?
So I think businesses are going to fail in any way, right? Yeah. Meaning like you're going to experience failure on that journey. The question becomes how you deal with that failure, number one. But then number two is, as you are moving and growing, what kind of barriers and buttresses are you putting in your process or system to allow your failure to not be final? And I think that's the important piece. You hear about the main things with the top reasons why businesses fail. Number one, not enough connection with their customer base, right? You are dealing with your customer. How are you getting feedback from your customer base on how you are doing, how getting a better understanding of what the problem it is that they have. Yeah. Number two, they aren't clear on how they're different from the competition. Right. So if I come in with a shirt company, how can I show that I'm clearly different than the Nikes and the Tommies or whatever's of the world, right? And then three, like being clear on what their value proposition is. Why the heck should I give you my money? Like, a lot of times as business owners, we'll come in and be like, we know the work that we do. We know the value it is. And like, yo, man, just hire me, trust me, man.
Right.
But, like, how can I need to be able to share what I do to you in a way that says, Dondrea, this is why your money is worth it to hire me. Yeah. Because here's what I'm going to do for you. And so being able to do those three things becomes important. And a lot of times I think a lot of businesses will look inward as opposed to looking outside to say, how does my business meet with my client? Yeah. And then how am I being clear with my client about why I am delivering value and why I am better than the person across the street that they can go to as well.
So I love the fact you said failure isn't final. Again, business journey in general, I've had to learn to embrace failure because there was a lot of fear in failure.
Yep.
There's so much fear. I done put all this money into it. Now I'm broke, but not broken. People, the amount of people you have to address that don't believe in what you're doing, and then when you fail, you got to go back and figure out like, how do I engage with
I told you wasn't gonna do this.
Because they typically don't say it to your face, but you know they on the I told them they wasn't going. But the other thing that you said was dope is like we've developed a blueprint because again, even with my business, like I've been able to go and start up different businesses, help other people with their businesses. So that's been really dope. So shout out to Spring GR and Attah for the work that he has done, but continues to do. Because again, I heard you a couple months ago on the stage talk about how we can have grace for other businesses, but we typically don't have that same grace for our smaller businesses that's still growing and learning, and they need that sandbox to grow and learn. So
yeah, and that's across the field, right? It's across the board. It's not just us patronizing small businesses, but other businesses patronizing our businesses. I was talking to a friend of mine some years ago, Michael Hyacinth. Shout out to Michael. He actually just opened up a cafe downtown. I still need to go, Michael, so please don't kill me. Has Heart Cafe is right downtown. And, this is a plug. Like I used to say at Spring GR, I'm gonna say it again. We don't do shameless plugs. We do plugs.
there we go.
So anyway, I was talking to him, and he has another business called Wimage. And he was talking about, he was working on, I think, getting some investors and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that he shared with me, he's like, as an African-American entrepreneur, I'm not given as many opportunities to fail as my white brothers and sisters. And it struck me the way he said that, because that is a completely different perspective on failure.
Yeah.
Because when people are more afraid to fail, he's like, give me the opportunity to fail. Because there's learning in failure.
Yes.
There's investors that will not invest in an entrepreneur if that entrepreneur hasn't had a failure in the past. So that is almost like a prerequisite for some investors.
Facts.
Because there's so much learning that can come from failure if you can put your mind towards it. I forget which book it is now where the author says that in every failure is the seed of a success of equal value.
Yeah.
So if you're only willing to like find that seed in the failure.
So Attah, so far on this podcast, you're like the gems that you drop come so naturally, right? So it sounds like you love learning. You love to engage in learning. Where did that come from?
It came from my pre-midlife crisis that I told you about. 2013, I lost my job. I was working in the bank and lost my job. I'd never been fired before, never been written up, lost my job. And I went through this, like, man, what am I going to do? And I didn't want to go back into banking. I'd been in banking for 10 years. I loved banking. I learned so much in my banking career. But then I knew that was not what I needed to do. And there was another event that happened in my life probably about 4 years before that. Maybe we'll talk about that later. But I went through this phase of trying to figure out what I wanted to do, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I'm calling up some of my mentors, some of my favorite persons, like, yo, I'm looking for a job. Can you help me? And they would always ask me the same thing, like, what do you want to do? I'm like, well, I feel like I was a good manager. Like, well, what industry? Like, I don't know. I just need a job. I got a family I got to feed. And nobody was telling me anything. So I just dove into trying to figure out what the heck did Attah want to do. So I started reading all these books, trying to figure out, around like purpose and passion and all of that kind of stuff. And just couldn't figure it out. And I started, one of the books I was reading that time was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And that book completely changed my life. In one of the habits, the last habit is sharpen the saw. And the idea behind it is rest, but then also kind of like just sharpening the saw. As I mentioned earlier, I believe, like, I love to help people.
Right.
And naturally, my belief is that how can I help people if I don't have the tools or the jewels to help? Right. And so I want to learn. Like, I want to learn. I want to grow, because then whatever I learn or grow, it allows me to give someone. I tell my kids all the time. I actually use the analogy of water or a cup with when I talk to them. I say, look, every last one of us is like this water bottle. Mm-hmm. And if I poured Coke into this bottle, can I pour out Sprite? No, right? It seems ridiculous.
Right.
If I'm going to pour out, I can be intentional about what I pour into this bottle to be able to pour out something. I can either just have it open and let whatever pours in there to pour out on others. But is that going to live out my mission for myself, which is to leave people better than I found them? And so I believe in order for me to do that, I need to be learning. I need to be growing. And so I love to read. I love podcasts. I love to connect with people. If I meet somebody that is halfway interesting, that I'm like, man, you just seem like a really good friend. I want to talk to you about what made you such a good friend. Oh, you're a really, really good father. Hey, how did you become a good father? Because I want to be that. So I just have this appetite to learn, because I want to be able to pour back out into others.
Appetite to learn. Oh, whew. So Attah, you're spilling in a lot, and I don't know if we got enough time, so we may have to bring you back. But you did start to talk about 4 years before your midlife crisis, something happened. What happened?
So I was working at the bank. As I told you before, like, I was always the quiet kid, like really, really quiet. Didn't say much. Almost felt like my voice didn't matter. But it's interesting, because I didn't feel woe was me. I just felt like my voice doesn't matter, so I'm just not going to share anything. Yeah, I was just I'm over here. I'm doing me, kind of a thing. And so when I got into management, got into banking, I remember I was still working at Chase at the time. I had lost my mom. My mom had passed some years prior, and I was a mama's boy. I'm no shame there.
Shout out to mama's boys.
That's right. Yeah. Shout out to mama's boys. And I kept getting this vision, and it scared the life out of me. And the vision was, I saw myself, like I was in my body, but it's almost like I was looking at myself in my body. And I was speaking to a crowd of people as far as the eye could see.
That's dope.
And I was like, that wasn't dope to me, man. I was freaking out. I was the kid that when I had to do a speech in class with 10 people, I was closing my eyes and shaking the entire time, because like I was just terrified of it. And I kept having this thing like all the time, and it just freaked me out, and I didn't know why. I didn't understand it or anything. So I remember calling kind of like a church mom of mine and saying, hey, mama, like, I've been having this vision. I don't know who the heck to talk to about it. And I don't want to talk to my friends about it, because I don't want to come across as if I'm trying to be this super famous guy that's going to talk to millions of people. Yeah. But like, it's freaking me. I want to know. I'm trying to understand it. And God bless her, because her response was not what I expected to hear. Her response was, she listened, right, completely, and then she said, Attah, she's like, I think that speaks to impact. So I'm like, okay, still scared the crap out of me. And she's like, but one thing I want to tell you, and I think this was the mother in her that was speaking. She said, I think she might have kind of sensed that maybe I was freaking. I don't know, but because as I'm talking to you now, I'm kind of wondering if this is where this came from. But she says, I think that's impact. But I want to say this to you, Attah. So a lot of times when we think about impact, we think about the big people that have impact, like the MLKs and the Steve Jobs or whatever, and we don't think about the little people that had an impact on those people. We don't think about the Sunday school teacher that made Martin Luther King have that dream. We don't think about the person that, inspired Steve Jobs. And so she's like, did those people have big impact too? And obviously I would say, yeah. So for me, what that conversation did is it took away the anxiety that I don't need to be the big guy up front. Right. I can be the guy that's just saying, yo, man, go ahead, keep doing your thing. And I think that was kind of one of the things that kind of shook me a little bit, to be okay in my skin and be okay with whether I was ever to become this person that's speaking to millions, or if I'm just the dude that is encouraging the next person that's going to speak to the millions. And so, yeah.
So the dope thing is, hopefully you'll be speaking to millions on this podcast because we're going to hit a million.
See, there it is.
See,
this might have been it right here.
We're going to hit a million. But again, I appreciate you sharing your experiences because many people that I encounter go through this phase of like, what's my purpose? I'm seeing what I'm trying to accomplish. Because you talked about your midlife crisis, like, what do I want to do? And then people always ask me like, what do you want to do? Yeah. Like even people I talk to today, they're like, man, I'm in a space where I went to school. I earned this degree. I don't want to do nothing that aligns with this degree. Yeah. So what do I do? So what advice do you have for people that are in a space where they're like, man, I don't know what I want to do. I feel stuck. What would you say to them?
So one of the things that I did when I was in that space, I can't remember where it was, when I was reading those books and trying to figure out purpose and passion, one of the things I saw, they said that your purpose or passion sometimes can come out of an intersection. An intersection between something that frustrates the heck out of you and something that brings you a ton of joy. So if you can find something at that intersection, a lot of times you'll find that passion. So for me, I went to this place of, well, what are those things for me? Like, what are the things that frustrate me? And it was at that time that I learned that one of the things that frustrates me is wasted and untapped potential. And then one of the things like I loved was helping my teams at the time, move from point A to point B. So then my thing was, can I work in a space that allows me to look at the potential that people have and be able to help them to get from point A to point B? And it was in that time frame that Spring GR was, the conversations about Spring GR were happening. And I remember me thinking, okay, I worked in the bank, but I want to help people. I want to help people find fulfilling work, because I believe that work was given to, God gave us work as a gift, but people are going to jobs that they hate, like 70%. I'm like, that's a big number. So like my vision for the world is a world where everybody's going to jobs that they love. Like, one, could you imagine just how much happier people would be, how much more effective work would be if people were doing that? So yeah, that was kind of like how I found it. So for people, what I tell people a couple of times is either that, right, that intersection, or two, just try stuff out.
Yeah.
Right. I have this conversation with college kids or high school kids all the time. I heard on a podcast, this dude that said that trying to figure out what you want to do is like me what you want to do when you grow up. Is like me asking you, hey, who you gonna marry when you grow up?
Woo!
I don't know who that is. But what's the process?
Don't ask me that at the end.
Ask who you gonna marry, Dondrea? But what you do is you see someone that might be of interest. Yeah. You take them out. You take them out on a date. If you like them, you take them out on another date. If you like them, maybe you plan a trip or whatever the case. But you take it a step at a time until you realize, like, man, like one day you realize, man, this is it.
This is it. Yeah.
So it's the same thing. It's like you test stuff out and you try stuff out. I mean, even with Spring GR, when I started with Spring GR, I reluctantly started. Like I was almost there, like, come on, like just, we're trying this out. Just, try to be a coach or whatever. And I was like, man, I'm trying to do this over here. I'm just starting my business, and But as I kept dating Spring GR, I was like, this is it. Like this is an intersection for me with not only my past experience in banking and working with small businesses, but wanting to help people and wanting to have people do fulfilling work and build wealth. Yeah, I'm like, let's do it.
So we had Dr. Shaq on, and one of the things he was saying that was insightful for me was he was like, he gets to do certain work. And I was like, dang, that's a shift in mindset. Because when you talk to most people about work, they're like, oh, I got to do or I have to do. But to shift it and say, I get to do this type of work, that's, in my opinion, that's a place of peace. Because the work that I do, I'm like, I get to do this work every day. Yeah. I was just at Wyoming High School this morning. We taught 3 workshops back to back to back. It was about like 120 students, right? And literally back to back to back. There was no break. And very similar to like introvert, I'm like, oh, okay, it's about to be a day. But within like a 2-hour something span, I left like, dang, that was dope. Like I get to do this, like, and I could do this forever. Like I love it. So I think that's really important. And then you said, kind of like dating your interest. Like, that's powerful. So giving yourself permission to explore, very similar to in college where they have the major that's exploratory. You just explore these majors, you know, you get to learn more about yourself, what you like, what you don't like, your strengths, weaknesses. So if you are in a space where you're like, man, I don't know, you know, what I want to do, date your interests. Like, think about, I think, Attah, you said, like, what frustrates you versus, what was that again?
What brings you joy?
What brings you joy? And then the other thing that I thought was powerful when I talked to my siblings, they used to say, like, man, growing up, you always did this. Mm-hmm. So kind of peeling back some layers of your childhood. What were things that you just loved doing as a child? Like, I loved teaching as a child. Yep. So, like, I'm like, dang, I didn't think about it. It's like, yeah, you used to always teach us. Like, you was the middle child, but you always taught all five of us anything. Like, you'll be like, this is the map. And I'm like, dang, that's crazy. So, like, take time to peel back some of the layers and see, you know, what you get joy from. Speaking of joy, fatherhood. Tell me about fatherhood.
Man, I love it. Mm-hmm. It is one of the proudest hats that I wear.
Mm-hmm. What has been some important, challenging moments in fatherhood, like some things that you've learned and things like that?
So it's funny you asked that. I remember once I was doing a interview for like some fatherhood something, and one of the questions, the kind of random questions they asked me was, what is it that you love about parenting? It's a basic question, right? Yeah. That anybody would ask. And I was like, what is the best thing I like about parenting? One of the things I always say, and I'm still trying to kind of perfect how I want to say this, but like I would always say that you can't cheat parenting, but you can cheat your kids. And what I mean by that is, you know, you hear these stories about kids that grow up in the same household. Yeah. One can grow up to be the president of the United States, and the other one can grow up to be a serial killer. I'm like, how the heck does that happen? Like, they both grew up in the same house.
Facts.
And I think, and I could be dead wrong, but I think some of that comes with, this is my parenting style, and this is how I parent. Yeah. But every kid is different.
Yeah.
Right? And so what I love about parenting is I can't cheat the process by saying this is Attah's parenting child. I have to listen to each kid and see what is it that excites you. What are the things that I could say to you that could cause you to shrink? And what are the things that I say to you that actually empower you? Yeah. And what I say to this kid and what I say to this kid could be completely different. I could say the same thing to you and the same thing to you, and you take it as the best motivation. You go out there and you kill it, and you take it as like, oh my God, I'm the worst person in the world. Yeah. And so I think for me as a parent, what I've learned in growing into parenting is being able to listen to my kids. Because the other thing with parenting is, at least growing up in a Black household, you kind of grow up in this, you're the kid, you just kind of listen, right? And I had great parents, so this isn't me trying to say I was traumatized or anything like that. I still think my parents are the best parents in the world. But I've learned the importance of creating a space to hear from my kids how I show up as a dad. And sometimes I've asked, and the things I've heard, I've been like, "Ooh, I didn't expect to hear that." But facts. I learned, right? I learned that, okay, this is how that affected you. And so, you know, one thing we started doing in our household with my wife was we started having family meetings. And these family meetings were an opportunity for our kids to be able to tell them how we are showing up to them as parents, to allow us to be better parents to them. So I've learned a lot from parenting that has helped me with leadership. And so sometimes I try my best not to say, one of the things I do for my kids is like, I ain't your kid, who you talking to like that? But a lot of the lessons I've learned about parenting, I actually apply in leadership. Like, I ain't your son, Attah. I don't know who you thought this was.
So, family meetings are dope because I also started that with my kids. Because similar to what you're saying about, again, specifically Black households, it was more like you listen to us. And I think I grew up missing a huge gap of like understanding the process behind decision making.
So there's a pod, The Breakfast Club. They just had, I don't know his name because it was just a a reel or whatever, and the Charlemagne asked the dude, he's like, yeah, so you said it's good for kids to disrespect their parents or something. I can't remember how he said it. And dude was like, hold on, I'm not saying that. But
Charlemagne be okay. Go ahead with that.
But his point was, when it went around the idea of helping kids understand decision making. So we raise our kids in this, do it because I told you to.
Yeah.
Right, but then that's not teaching them how to make the decision, right? If I tell you to go cut the grass, go cut the grass. Don't ask me why am I doing that. But he's saying that when your kid actually asks you why, don't shut it down, because that's helping them to find their voice. We want our kids to be confident, be able to use their voice. And it's very interesting because my daughter, my daughter Anaya, she's a super quiet kid, but she's always been my why kid. But it was never disrespectful. And I would always tell her, like, it's okay to ask why, but make sure it doesn't come across as disrespectful. Facts. But there's so much that I learned from her when she would ask me the why that taught me that I need to teach her how to think about these things. But it allows them to have a voice. And it's interesting to see her, when she was 12, write a speech at a children's camp that said that she's going to use her voice to change the world. And I remember sitting in the audience like, who is this kid and where the heck did she come from? But, that idea of changing the dynamic of, you can ask me the questions and I will give you but there's going to be sometimes like, hey, Dad just said you got to do that. Yeah. But helping our kids understand the decision making. So you're absolutely right.
And developing that voice, because very similar to you, my oldest daughter, she's applying for colleges now. And in her personal statement, she talked about how living here has helped her find her voice. Because on one hand, like you said, we want our kids to grow up and be more confident, because we also know that people who enjoy their life, are successful, etc., like confidence is huge in that, right? Negotiation, all those things. But you spend a lot of time in the household, right? So it's like these different dynamics where you're like, okay, where can that kid learn confidence? But then as parents, if we're like, we want our kids to, provide their voice more, how do we show up and listen? Because that can be challenging.
100%.
Yeah.
Because if we don't create the space to listen, we either are going to invite them to continue to do that, or we're going to diminish it. And so one of the things we chatted about even in your program was how do we manage our responses, manage our defensiveness, right? So when my kid comes to me and tells me about myself, do I just say, who are you talking to? You
better not be saying that to me.
Or do I internalize it? Make sure that it's coming across in a respectful way, but then take it back and go listen and say, what can I learn about myself and how I show up to this kid.
Shout out to the parents out there that's trying to figure it out. As I said in my previous podcast, there's no clear way and best way to raise your kids beyond what you create from a value standpoint, the goals and the things you want your kids to accomplish in the future. And it's a journey like many other journeys. So always remain flexible, and then support systems have been huge in just any space of like success, development, and growth, because those are different perspectives. Those are people that can challenge and support you. I love how Attah came in because I invited him in to talk to our group about leadership and stuff. And he used me as like a model, which I was thankful for because it helped me see myself in a space of accountability. So again, shout out to other things that Attah does, which is help develop teams. If your team is like, look, we need to come in and talk about identity, accountability, communication. It doesn't matter. Make sure y'all connect with him because, again, we don't do shameless plugs. We, just plugs. So as we get to the end, hopefully y'all are enjoying these conversations. I know in our previous podcast, people are like, man, we need to hear more, etc. So that's super good. If you feel like that during this one, if we get enough comments, we'll invite him back, maybe. Invite him back. If you want to come back.
This is your show, man. I do what you tell me.
Inviting back. So we'll start to get to the end. One of the things that we just started was we have our Let's Talk Money cards, because we know sometimes it's hard to have conversations about money in any way, shape, or form, whether it's negotiating or business, whether it's personal finance, whether it's with your kids. It does not matter. But we developed these Let's Talk Money cards so that we can at least start the conversation. So in the spirit of having that conversation, I'm going to mix these up real quick so that's just random. And I'm going to ask Attah one of these questions. And his goal is to talk about it for 2 hours. No, I'm kidding. Just to touch on this topic. So let's see. How important is it for your partner / spouse to know your credit score and history?
Ooh. More mad, more. She don't know my credit score now. No, hey, but no, that's real though. As they say, more marriages I think have ended because of finances than they have from I think infidelity. Don't quote me on that. I might be wrong, but I know it's a very high number that fail because of. And my wife and I went through that. So part of my story is in finances. You've probably heard it because we sit on the board of Project Green together, and I shared this I've shared this there before. Coming to the United States, I did not know anything about how U.S. money works. Yeah. Right. And so when I came here, I made every money mistake that's out there. Right. Getting credit cards and not knowing how the heck they work, maxing them out and then getting them shut down. Using payday loans, using the rent-a-centers of the world. What else? I've had identity theft. Like you name it, I've been through it. And when my wife and I got married, bachelor, I had just gone through a process of almost losing my house. Wow. Not losing it was a straight up miracle, which is why to this day I always say, like, my house does not belong to me. Like, God has allowed me to have a house, and so therefore when somebody needs shelter, if I have the space, I'm going to provide it because it's been a gift to me. So anyway, when we first got married, I was just on the tail end of kind of getting my house back in order. But one bad habit that I still had at the time was payday loans. I grew up in this mentality that money is always going to come. So I have no problem spending it, right? And I've been broke before. I didn't die, so I can be broke again. Like so that was kind of like my thing. If I needed something, like, hey, I'm gonna go get this $600 payday loan, and I did it, and it never affected like bills, so to speak, in the house. But I remember when my wife found out about it, like we had this big fight. She's like, dude, like, what are you, like, why are you doing this? And my wife, shout out to her, she has been a big part of building kind of our financial buttresses, if you will, and kind of building savings for us and all of that. It's all been her. Like, interesting, I'm the one that worked 10 years at it with a master's degree.
That's real.
But she's the one that kind of like, and so for us, and one of the things that she always said to me was like, we need to be aligned on our finances. Like, it just is what it is. And it was hard for me at first because I felt shame in getting payday loans or whatever, but I did not want to show her that. Right. And so, I think it's absolutely critical because at the end of the day, you are building together. Yeah. And it is so sweet to be able to build together. I remember when I lost my job, in 2013, I was the primary breadwinner. Right. And so with me losing my job, okay, now I got to get unemployment. So now she becomes the primary breadwinner, right? So then, like, being able to build together, and like, had we not built that trust financially, I wonder how we would have navigated those months of me not having a job. So absolutely critical. Credit scores are important in the United States, whether we like it. There's people you talk to, I think Anthony O'Neill is one of those folks that talks, he has a different philosophy. Not a bad thing. I watch his videos too. But credit scores are important. I think that being able to know allows you guys to kind of Voltron / join your forces together and being able to like build. So,
and I think you literally just ended on something that's important, like being able to join forces. Because sometimes, whether it's spouse, partner, etc., people who are together and trying to, make financial impact, if I don't know that every time I'm making an increase, you're making a decrease, we're working against each other, and vice versa. So being able to add that to a level at some point, again, this comes down to comfortability, trust, like all those factors. We're not really talking about that, but more so like it is important. And the faster or sooner we start to engage in the impact that we could potentially have by just knowing, the better, right? So I've seen people who, whether they're dating, married, or about to get married, and they're like, I didn't know they had that much debt, right? Because then that adds to another barrier in whatever they're trying to do. Or I didn't know that they had these closed accounts or open debt accounts that every time I get paid, we're paying off something I didn't know we had to pay on. So like you said, in marriages, in like even just family relationships, I remember I was giving a family member money and they were using it to pay down some credit. They weren't even paying it off, right? So me being able to look at it, I'm like, we're just paying the minimum. I didn't know that I was giving you money to make a minimum payment. We could have paid this off. So now you impacted my money. Mm-hmm. So it's things like that where, like you said, it's important to, especially if you have good intentions, you know, because that's a huge trust factor. Yes, oh, yeah, they broke. They about to go bankrupt. So, again, that's another piece that we ain't going to touch too much on. But in order to end this lovely podcast, I always allow people an opportunity. We just going to let that hang. An opportunity to ask me a question. And then I do my best to answer. It could be any question except for that one.
Got one.
Okay. You got one?
I forgot what it was.
Don't want it? Oh, okay. All right, go ahead, Attah. What's up?
I was trying to think of which direction I wanted to take this in. I want you to do where do you want to be in 5 years? Or anything like that. But I want to ask a question. What is one goal or aspiration that you have that you've been thinking about, but you haven't spoken out into the atmosphere, if you will?
I would say finish my book. Yeah, I have a book that's called Goal Getter. And GOAL stands for Getting Over All Limitations. And in it involves my story. Because, my kids know my story. People really close to me know my story. And those people always reach out to me and be like, dang, like, it's crazy that you're here now. And it's because I look like, where am I? I'm surviving still. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like I'm thriving. But in the book, as I think I'm on chapter 4, and it's been, Ty, okay. So yeah, I got to finish this book. So in the first couple chapters, I'm kind of outlining a lot of the barriers and points where I either wanted to give up, I wanted to quit, or I was just like, this ain't worth it. And for whatever reason, I was able to get over it. So for me to finish that book, I think will be a good blueprint, but also it will be therapeutic to like uncover like, dang, Dondrea, you did go through that. Because I think I've trained myself to be like, all right, I got to keep pushing. I don't have too much time to reflect on it. I got to go because the kids need me, the community need me. So again, see, you didn't ask me a question. Attah, why you do that?
Hey, I asked you that because I have the same thing, right? So I have goals that I've kind of had. I'm like, and the ironic part is it's a book for me as well, right? A book that I've been sitting on my wife. I can't say it's not one that I've spoken in the atmosphere or whatever because my wife knows about it and she's like, dude, what you doing? So I got you. So I'm gonna hold you accountable.
I literally was thinking that.
I'm gonna hold you accountable.
I literally was thinking that because I think that's another factor too because I haven't really said it like out loud because I'm a firm believer of once it comes out, like the world holds you accountable.
That's it.
So yeah, see, he got me. So we gonna end on that because again, that's one thing I appreciate about Attah. However he literally, you said getting people from point A to point B. So you're literally living in your gift to help people uncover things to get them from point A to point B. So I thank you for coming today.
Thanks for the invitation, man.
And we have to have him back. There's a whole list of people that we have to have back because like you touched on so many things that I've listened to and I'm reflecting on now that has been very powerful for us. And I hope for the community, y'all see it as powerful because it's important to, find people that have relatable stories and recognize that we all go through stuff to get to places. It doesn't mean we have to stay in those places. And how do we get to other spaces and places? So with that, we want to say, see you soon. We'll talk more money whenever we get a chance. But thank you.